Welcome to week one of the Generative AI Go-to-Market Success Sprint, brought to you by NMSU's Arrowhead Center. These Sprint Accelerator programs are designed to help businesses at any stage launch, grow, and take the next step forward. In this session, I cover the foundations of using generative AI in your go-to-market strategy. Whether you're a founder, marketer, or part of a sales team, you'll learn how generative AI works, why prompting is a skill, and how to apply it to real-world sales and marketing challenges. We cover core concepts, practical use cases, and how to embed AI into your daily workflows. Let's get into it. First, tell you quick about me for some of you who don't know me. I'm coming at this from a couple of different angles. I'm a former electrical engineer, patent litigator. I have been wearing the product hat as a startup CEO founder for the last almost 13 years. And in the past, I have built sales technology systems, marketing technology systems, and more recently, a variety of generative AI enabled products in the tech sales and tech startup ecosystem. All of this is to translate that hands-on experience that I've had into some kind of tactical value for your go-to-market, because that's what everyone has to do now. So I want to start with some basics. What does it mean to go to market, and why does AI fit into this at all? So for that, when we talk about go to market, or GTM, as I will refer to it from time to time, we're talking about a full system that your company uses to find, win, and grow customers. So I want to zoom in on that a little bit. It's not just sales. It's the targeting, it's the outreach, right? It's the messaging, it's the conversion, and it's the feedback that you get from your prospects and customers that creates the entire go-to-market motion. And these questions here are really the foundation that we're going to keep coming back to. If you don't already journal, I strongly suggest that you start, and that you start maybe with these questions. And you may not have the answers, but just asking yourself the questions is a really great place to start. So a lot of people think of go-to-market as a funnel, but I view it more as a system. And it's inputs, that's like your market, the message, the product that you have, and then you run them through a series of activities such as prospecting, you're taking meetings, right? You're trying to close opportunities. And the outputs of all of this are, of course, revenue, which we all want. But what I really want to emphasize is that the main and most important output to all of this is learning. And why? Because ultimately, go-to-market is a feedback loop. And the best teams doing this, they're not just executing and that's that. They're learning faster than the competition, right? They run tighter feedback loops. And that is where AI is the multiplier. That's the leverage. It compresses the time from insight to action to more insights, and you get this virtuous cycle going. So that's really what I want to focus on today and make sure that you have an opportunity to dig into. Okay, so every company, whether you're selling software or services or lab equipment or diagnostic testing or anything you're selling, ultimately what you need to do is master these 6 motions here, right? You're defining your ideal customer persona. You are doing all the steps to closing a deal. And all of this is your go-to-market engine. And this is where GenAI is going to come and play. So let's start by just defining briefly, what is generative AI? I like to think of it as this function, this capability that makes language into a software function. And that just might be my startup software engineer hat on, but this is really special. Because when you think of GenAI as making language as your software function, then what it can do now is create language as an automatable layer. And that is the unlock here. Right now, with this, it can summarize calls, it could write your outreach, it could extract insights from your sales data, Anywhere words are being used, AI can ultimately help. And I really believe that. But first, let's make sure we're all on the same page about how it works, because that is going to influence how we use it, when we use it, and why do we use it. So to that end, a lot of people treat AI like a magic box, right? It's doing some kind of guessing, and yes, I understand that it's guessing the next word based on everything that it's seen in the training data. And ultimately, that's why your inputs and your instructions, so-called your prompt, matter so much, right? The clearer your setup is, the better your results are. And to give an example, I don't want to spend too much time on this because everyone raised their hand and told me in the email that they are ChatGPT experts. They use it many times a day. I heard multiple times from many of you, which is fantastic. What I want to just leave with you is how the heck does this thing work? And without getting into the vector and kind of array mathematics involved under the hood, I want you just imagine that you have a bag of marbles. Every marble has a word on it. A robotic arm is going to draw a marble out of this bag. And if you were to do this randomly, you would get gibberish, right? You would get a string of words that make no sense next to each other. But the major unlock that happened just a few years ago is that we had the GPT, the transformer model, which added attention mechanism to the entire system, which is just jargon to say that the probability of the next marble being drawn is adjusted by the previous set of words that have come before it. And so on these marbles in my deck here, you could see it says, the boy went to the. And if we have those previous five words, you can alter the distribution of probabilities about what is the next word. Yet in theory, the word palabra in Spanish could be what can be drawn, extremely unlikely if all the previous words are English, right? And so, the next word might be playground, school, park. Those are all high probability words, right? But so is hospital. Hospital is also, possible. It would be unfortunate, but that starts giving you an idea. And so when you are setting up your prompts and when you are interacting with these Gen AI systems, you of course understand that they are not reasoning in the way that you or I might reason, at least initially. They are statistical models that are trying to figure out what is the next best word. There are all kinds of settings around how much variance you want to put on the ability to draw the next probability. So when you see hallucinations, when you see errors, it's essentially that low probability chance that it drew the word pizza when it said the boy went to the pizza, and that doesn't make any sense. And then that bootstrapped the entire sequence of words that are coming next. All of this to say, good inputs mean better predictions, mean better outputs. And that's really what I want you to take away. And we're going to have an opportunity to experience that ourselves. Now, as you think about how and where you want to apply generative I want you to think about these different value creators. All right, these are 5 ways in which Gen AI delivers something to you. It speeds up routine work, right? It helps you personalize things at scale. It can mine insights from the data you've given it. It can ensure consistency across teammates. These are ultimately the things that build and create learning loops for you to apply again. And these are the ingredients of the AI-powered go-to-market strategy. So now that we have some of those foundations, we understand what I'm referencing when I say go-to-market. We understand what I say when I'm referencing generative AI. I want to bring these two together now and talk about the AI-powered go-to-market. And I don't want to show you just hypotheticals. These are real go-to-market teams that are using generative AI to scale their efforts that were previously too expensive, too slow, too manual. And out of many, many examples out there, I've picked out 3 that I thought really stood out to me and pushed the boundaries of what's possible. They are going to be perhaps aspirational for many of you, but that's the goal, right? And I want to break down the technique that they are using as a way of helping you dream as a way of helping you identify the art of what's possible. That's my goal. Okay, so first we'll look at Klarna. It's a buy now, pay later company, and they took generative AI and they rewired their entire campaign engine for advertising. So instead of sequentially creating campaigns, they launched 30 campaigns at once, with AI doing most of the heavy lifting across the copy, the design, and the image generation. And so for me, this is what it means to scale creativity, right? And they did it as a result of what's possible, but they also did it while cutting millions of dollars in cost. Now, they're a giant company, hundreds, if not thousands of employees, but you too can do things like this. And to show you what that means, I want to walk through some of the steps of my belief, my inference of how they accomplish this. So this is the operating model here, right? We start with an LLM, ChatGPT, defining regional ideal customer profiles and preferences. So you can imagine you're the Klarna team, you're in product marketing, you're the marketing department, and you likely have some ICPs. But you know that your ICP is specific down to the country, perhaps even the state that you are in, and the temporal nature of what is going on in the world. Are we in a low interest rate environment? What's going on? That can affect the ICP and how you want to message to them. So they take that, create, let's say, 30 briefs of their ICPs, segmented down to the narrowest they can. Then they pass that into the next stage, which is an LLM that can draft the campaign briefs specific to, let's say, an event. Is it Mother's Day? Is it Black Friday? How might these different ICPs react or engage with a different timely event that they could sell around? Great. Now they have 30 campaign briefs. Now they pass it to the next stage and they have Chad write ad copies for every variant of those 30 ICPs for a given event. All right. And you can imagine that it kind of puts out all the different variations of ad copy. It might throw out 100 ad variations. Which one is best? We don't know yet, but we can test all of them because it's a high throughput advertising environment where you get data very quickly about click-throughs and purchase that's attributable to a specific ad. From there, you can imagine then that they pass this on to one of the many different LLMs capable of generating image assets. This would be things like Midjourney, ChatGPT 4o is very capable now, Flux, and many others. And you could imagine that generating all these different kinds of images, right? For Mother's Day, perhaps there are elements that bring in concepts from Mother's Day. For Black Friday, we're bringing in concepts around Thanksgiving and other issues that they might want to touch on, for example. All of this then continues to feed forward, and you store all these inputs in some shared folder. There's a human in the loop here that's reviewing all of this content, the ad variations, campaign briefs, and the images and how they align. With that light touch feedback loop, they improve any of the ad variants or discard the ones where there are hallucinations or issues that don't quite fit because these systems are not perfect, of course. Um, and then they deploy those across whatever advertising platforms they want to drop this into. For this, I'm imagining, you know, Meta, Instagram, Google Ads, etc. So the last part and the most perhaps important part that I keep nailing on is you track performance, right? They're extracting all this data probably through API, but that's not necessary. You can export a CSV file and they're feeding it back and understanding which of these campaigns performed, right? We can send that data exactly back to an LLM for data analysis to say which of these is doing well, which one is not, why. Come up with a hypothesis and help me understand, and then double down and put more ad variations in that specific section. So that is an example of how you could do an advertising campaign through each of the different steps. But I want to give you a different use case as well to help us think of what is possible. Let's look at DeepGram. They are a conversational voice AI startup, And this SaaS company built a 3,000 page SEO content library using generative AI, right? They ended up targeting long tail keywords, then layering that in with light human QA, quality assurance, and ultimately grew their daily traffic from about 1,000 hits per month to about 30,000 hits per month. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, that's mouth-watering results, right? And there are some questions and issues and challenges we need to unpack around, is Google okay with this? By all accounts, they seem to be fine with AI generated content so long as it follows their EEAT framework. So it's important to make sure that the human QA part is very much a highlighted aspect of this. But let's zoom in and break down, what are they doing? How are they doing this? And the system is actually pretty simple, right? They're going into an SEO tool, Ahrefs, for example. They're exporting all of the long tail keywords that might be interesting for their ICP. They're organizing all of that into clusters with ChatGPT. In the next block, they're generating that content block by block. Very important part. I want to just pause here for a minute. When I say block by block, what I mean is that most often we might be tempted to say, I want you to write an article about XYZ keyword. And then it writes an article. If you ask an LLM, for the most part, if you ask an LLM to generate the draft in one go, it won't be amazing. It'll be mediocre. It'll do the job, right? And if you're not paying attention and you're not an expert in the field, it might be good enough. But for the sake of creating SEO content, which is supposed to be highly relevant and based and founded in experience and teach something to the reader, this is often insufficient. So using a block by block approach, what I mean is you break up the process of writing a blog post into discrete sections. You have an introduction, right? You have your sort of thesis, point number one, point number two, point number three, and a conclusion. And each of those pieces ought to be passed on to an LLM to draft just that portion. Once it's drafted, add it to some kind of context file, and then reattach the file when it drafts the next section so that it has in memory essentially what it's already drafted. And when you do that and you perform light edits, you can get truly good content. Good, if not great. And so that's that engine that they created, compounding this organic growth. And the last part of it, as I mentioned already, is QA. None of this goes anywhere without humans in the loop, making sure that it's still high quality information. Once you have a finished draft, right, you feed it into another image LLM to generate image assets that go along with that blog post. And now you have all of this structured into, let's say, a CSV file, right? It's a spreadsheet. Most content management systems, the CMS, you're probably familiar with WordPress, Webflow, Framer, all those have an opportunity for you to import a CSV file in order to generate hundreds of posts at once that you can then mark for scheduled publishing. So imagine you spend a week doing this and you essentially queue up months worth of content that is high value, targeted for long tail keywords. And that's how you start slowly trickling in your traffic from search engines, indexing this, finding it, and you, of course, pushing it in every channel that you can. One more case study. So in this example, we have a scenario where Spare Tech deals with a very heavy face-to-face sales culture. And what they aim to do is use AI to scale that human touch. Okay. Their reps recorded a single video, and then GenAI created hundreds of personalized versions, each with a custom greeting. So it feels like one-on-one, face-to-face type communication, but it's massively scalable. And so in this GIF that you see here, this is actually an example of one of their videos. Now, if you pay very careful attention, you could see that there are little artifacts that maybe give you a clue that this is generative AI. It has to do in the eyes, the way that they sort of look. It has to do with the mouth and the teeth. but it's so fast and often subtle enough that if you're a buyer who is in a hurry and just see the video, it may not necessarily, trip your alarms. Now, why do I mention that? Because ultimately, there is a balance, there's a tension between doing things that are massively scalable because generative AI allows it and coming off as inauthentic. And handling that tension is a journey that all of you and I have to manage. And so I want to emphasize that at all cases, you should try to be as authentic as possible. What does that mean? Does that mean I should not use generative AI video? Not necessarily. So long as the message that's being conveyed is truly authentic and very personalized and somehow targeted to that individual in a way that you put your perspective, your thoughts into it, I think that is on the safe side. It's close, but it's on the safe side. If you are just uh, taking people's LinkedIn data, generating AI copy, and then popping that into a video, you're going to be probably one of thousands of people sending those kinds of messages. And so I just want to caution you of that tension. But let's break down how they did this, right? This workflow is very tight. The reps record one master video. AI then personalizes that video and that introduction based on content that you have about each prospect, ideally through enrichment. Even better if it's through some unique data source that you have, such as CRM or past interaction notes, so that it's authentic, unique. Then the system sends this with some kind of clickable preview. And when the individual buyer receives this video that has been generated through this batch process, then that's where you get that lift. Okay. But as before, none of this should go out without some kind of human QA. To spot check the video, spot check the content, make sure that it is representing you, the brand, and the message that you want to convey accurately, authentically. And ultimately, as I mentioned before, tracking the reply rate, tracking the metrics, learning from it, and then feeding back in to do it again. Okay, so what does this mean? How is go-to-market changing for the teams that we already have in place? Well, the first thing that we can see is that AI doesn't replace people. What it does is it changes their work. So sales development reps, SDRs, now they get to research, they get to write faster, right? The account executives, AEs, get summaries that are auto-generated from their follow-up and the meetings that they're having, right? Marketers might be going from some kind of static playbook to dynamic assets, like in the Klarna example. And RevOps ultimately gets smarter insights from those patterns that they're seeing, as opposed to just static reports and a dashboard that they have to then spend time interpreting what those things mean. So if you want this to work, you need three things. First and foremost is clean, structured data, right? The AI is only as smart as the data you're going to give it. So if you have garbage data, that's where you need to start. Number two, you saw in all the case studies, what did they have? That was the foundation of those campaigns. It was a very clear, well-defined, ideal customer persona married with real pain points. Now, I know lots of people are going to say, I could ask ChatGPT for the pain points. Yes, you can. However, I don't know that that's going to be specific enough. I would really emphasize and encourage you to go deep on the pain points that your customer persona has, because now with everyone having access to generative AI, that is ultimately your differentiator and one of your unique selling points, which is how well do you understand their pain point? If you understand their pain point well enough, you can press on it, you can message against it. Okay. And the third thing you need is a mindset of fast experimentation. That's ultimately the recipe for unlocking any kind of leverage you can get from generative AI. Okay, so here is your assignment. I want you to audit your current go-to-market flow. Review the slides. Remember those initial questions. Remember the motions. try to figure out where are you excelling, where are you weak, and then pick one place to insert generative AI. Run a test and then capture what is working and share it with your team. But also, as we go from week to week in this sprint, share it back with us. At the beginning of our sessions, we're going to start with a share every week, and you are going to tell us. I'm going to call on each of you. What was the one thing you picked? What is the experiment that you ran? And what did you learn from it? And this is ultimately how we're going to build momentum, internal confidence, and expand our capabilities. All right. So we're going to wrap up this part of the session. We're going to shift into our small breakout rooms at 10 o'clock. That gives us a fair amount of time for a Q&A. I really wanted to make sure we left that space available. But first, I just want to go into what is going to happen at the top of the hour. So in our breakout sessions, we're going to take everything we just covered, the value pillars, the use cases, the real examples, and we're going to make them personal. They're going to be personalized to you, your company, and whatever challenge you're facing. And thank you all of you for sharing that. So each group is going to share their go-to-market challenges. Each group is going to gauge where they are with generative AI, and you're going to explore how you might use AI to solve a real problem that you're facing. Now, I want to transition to some Q&A. So thank you so much for participating in the poll. While we figure out the breakout rooms, I want to turn it over to you and really figure out what questions do you have? What thoughts were prompted by today's presentation? And I'm excited to dig into it. So I'll give everyone a beat and a count of 10 seconds to kind of just gather their thoughts, think about it, and then raise your hand using the reactions tool in your Zoom session. How you doing, Leif?
Hey, pretty good, man. I'm here in Tucson today, so it's been nice and warm down here. Um, so are you gonna show us how to do all those levels of AI, the workflows, et cetera, in this workshop? Are we gonna get to that?
Yes, the breakout rooms are where we're going to get our hands dirty. And in the
Awesome.
breakout rooms, we're going to have facilitators. I will be one of them. And we are going to put together one sort of challenge and interactively give it a shot and try it out together. And ultimately,
Awesome.
that is what will give you, I think, the learning. Because I could tell you and talk about it all day, but unless you get your hands dirty, the learning won't happen.
Cool, man. Thank you. And I also have a request. There,
Please.
there, there's a lot of acronyms that you're using that aren't necessarily translating in my head really easily or quickly.
Okay.
And so my request is just to maybe call those out for us so that so that we can, yeah, just have an idea of what we're talking about. That'd be
Great
helpful.
suggestion.
That'd be helpful.
It's hard to know where people are. It's a very diverse group of people with different experience and levels. What I'll do is, at minimum, prepare a glossary of acronyms
Great.
that we could send with the follow-up recording and post-meeting session notes. Does that solve it for you?
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you. Chandler at Grovera. Hi.
Hey, how are ya? I'm kind of piggybacking off of Leaf, I think here, where I am using like ChatGPT for a lot of these flows, but I'm the link that kind of goes from one aspect to the next. So, okay, somebody schedules a meeting, or I have this really big data set. And I kind of do those steps incrementally with ChatGPT, and I don't have the link in between. And I'd love to get into what can support that, because my understanding right now is that there isn't like something native in these large language models that might be chat based
Hmm.
that would, like link to your calendar specifically. So I'd love to know where that gap is and where the bridge is.
Yeah, absolutely. For that, let me take a detour into another case study that I have prepared before to specifically answer the question, and then we can kind of circle up to see if that answers what you had in mind. So give me one sec while I pull that up. In the meantime, if anyone else has another question, please throw it into the chat or start preparing that. All right, so this is to the question from Chandler about what is that bridge that allows people to perform some of those automations, those workflows. This is an example I prepared for a different presentation at a startup week, and it's doing this automated call prep. So what we're gonna do is, and I'll go through this quickly and we can dive into it if you want. The process is to connect a Google Calendar as an input. Then we're gonna flow it through Zapier as a bridge, a process that I'll unpack with you in a moment, prompts that we're going to input into this, and then the output is this kind of prep memo in your email in Slack that I mentioned earlier. So here it starts with connecting your Google Calendar to Zapier. It could be any calendar, but that's just an example here. And this is Zapier. Zapier is an automation platform that allows you to control in a what you see, what you get canvas-like format, how steps are going to flow. So what I've done is I've laid out the first block, which is a Google Calendar block. I've connected it to my calendar using Google OAuth. And from there, I have passed in every time a new calendar event is triggered on my system, it enters this flow automatically and it loops through the different attendees in that calendar entry. And so you can see here, attendees are being pulled. And then from it, I'm filtering out myself. I don't need a memo about who I am or why I want to meet them. And from this, I now have all the attendees in a meeting that's not me. Based on that, I'm sending it over to a third-party data enrichment provider, Apollo. There are many others. You pick your favorite. I'm passing in the email address as the key for enrichment. And what's coming back then is an extracted set of data about their name, their title, a headline they might have included in LinkedIn, for example, what company they belong to, maybe an SEO description of their company. And this is the data that's coming back from enrichment. Here you can imagine not just enriching the data from third party, you can imagine pulling this data from your CRM as well. And that's just another block you can use instead of Apollo, for example. So now I am feeding it into a ChatGPT block. And now this is where we're getting the process of chaining prompts. So here this is my prompt message. I'm saying I'm going to give you information about who I am, what I sell, and the person that I am meeting. I'm going to try to zoom in if that helps. I want you to carefully review this information and help me prepare. Oops. And here's who I'm meeting with. And I drop the information that came in from the enrichment step. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to consider who they are, what trends are impacting their industry. I want you to tell me what are their likely jobs, pains, and gains. And I want you to summarize all of this for me in a report. Okay. From that, I am then sending it to myself via Gmail as soon as that calendar entry is created. And away we go. I get a markdown representation of a person who just booked a meeting with me. So now we could also then set up a timer, have it run every 15 minutes, and essentially send a Slack message to me if this person and this meeting is about to happen in at least 15 minutes from now. So not only do I get an email when the calendar invite happened with the memo, I'm also getting a quick reminder memo of 15 minutes before the meeting happens. And the goal of all this is just to prepare myself for the meeting. Who are they? What are we talking about? What questions are they going to ask? How can I best prepare? Chandler, does that answer your question in terms of that automation bridge?
Yeah, absolutely. And these are all being powered by an API connection. Is that
Yep,
correct?
that's right.
That they're all okay. So they all kind of play well together.
Yep.
Okay. Do you know, I mean that I'm kind of like giddy seeing this because it's so powerful. Do you know, does this integrate with like HubSpot and
Yes.
sales? Oh,
Yep. Those are just other blocks you could use. Zapier has, I don't know how many connections, thousands of connectors. I love that
incredibly
smile. That's great.
powerful. I'm like, yeah, I'm like,
Cool.
this Super, super cool. Thank you.
And Leif, does this start answering part of your question? This is not so much on the prompt engineering side, but this is more on the workflow automation side.
Yeah, dude, I'm totally excited over
Rock and
here.
roll. Love
Yeah,
it. And then Lo had a question. I don't know if Leif, if you want to add something to that, but if not, I'll go to Lo. All right, go for it, Lo. You had a question.
Yeah, this is so fabulous, Rod. I'm so excited to be here. And I am familiar. So I come from agency life, marketing. And so I'm familiar with the paid ads. And so my question for you is it's similar as far as like maybe Zapier will also help, but I know like the tracking pixels and things like that. So I've run campaigns and done deep dives into, segmentation and things like that. But my question is like when you said garbage in, garbage out situation, how are we going to track that? Will you walk us through the process of being able to gather that data, feed it in properly? Because I'm familiar on the paid side, but not so much on the organic side, or I know sometimes that data is hard to track down on the organic side. So just curious if you could speak to that.
Yeah, maybe let me ask one question back to you.
Sure.
In the advertising world, the data that we would grab and then feed back would be campaign names, and then the metrics that we want to use, maybe impressions, clicks, click-through rate, all those different kind of metrics that are relevant. And then what we would do is perhaps export that. It's a spreadsheet. We feed it back into the prompt, and we say, analyze these campaign results. Here are the ad variants. Hypothesize why these performed well or not well relative to each other. Here's my ideal customer persona. And what you would extract is essentially hypotheses that you and your team would then debate about why it worked or didn't work. And so
Right.
that being the model, now let's extrapolate that out to, let's say, SEO, for example, or an
Mhm.
outreach email campaign. It's the exact same flow. We have our ICP, we have
Mhm.
messaging or a campaign that we attempted, we have metrics about that campaign, and we have essentially a request to Chad that is help me hypothesize and understand why these campaigns performed the way that they did. And
Okay.
so that ultimately is the framework that we'll use for purposes of iteration and learning. And then we can extrapolate that again to, let's say, SEO. All right, my SEO was I was targeting these long tail keywords. Here are the articles that contained those keywords. Here are the metrics that those articles performed over my defined period of time. Now, did they achieve their result? Why not? Help me brainstorm, hypothesize. Does that answer your question in terms of what we want to gather as data and feed
Yeah.
forward?
The system and the process makes sense. I guess the tool is my question. Do you use Google Analytics to tie in from the website or from the campaigns, or what is that piece? Like, what is that like Zapier connection for that part?
Yep, that's great. Okay, so yes, Google Analytics, if that's what you have, but many content management systems will also have their own analytics coming out of it, right? So your WordPress might have analytics about how individual articles performed. Ultimately, the key part, if you're using just Google Analytics, is to make sure that you have data at a per page level mapped to which of those pages contain the keywords that you were trying to rank for. So
Okay.
for this, I don't have a specific out of the box tool that you can just kind of, put it in and you're done. This one either comes out of your CMS or comes out of Google Analytics that is then paired with a little bit of lightweight data crunching to just associate this page relates to these keywords.
Got it.
Cool.
Super helpful. Thank you, Rod.
Right on. All right. Any other questions? Oh, Chandler's got a question. Go for it.
I find that ChatGPT has a hard time with like large scale data sets
Okay.
or I in in the example that I'm thinking of, I put in maybe 500 contracts and asked it to go look in a specific place for the end date so that I can target which ones are starting a renewal soon. And it wasn't it gave me some pretty mediocre data on there.
Great
Is there a
question.
way that we can
Love
kind of
this.
bypass that and get better quality results?
I love that you're attempting that. That's fantastic. So, just by way of a bit of background, one reason why this tends not to work, and even when you have a gigantic context window, and to Leif's point, what is a context window? A context window is the amount of tokens that you could feed into ChatGPT at any time. And each model has a different context window. As an example, I believe ChatGPT's current context window for 4.0 is maybe 128,000 tokens or something like that. That is a lot. That like many pages of PDF, like double-digit number of pages of a PDF can be popped in. So, one, if you put in 500 contracts, I suspect you either overflowed the context window or you moved to a different model that has a bigger context window. So you got really excited. Gemini released a 1,000,000 token context window, and you just like drop all 500 in there. They fit. It doesn't overflow. That's great. However, um, you get to a point where you are then essentially asking the generative AI system to find a needle in a haystack, right? You're giving it a lot of hay. With 128,000 token context window that few people ever actually push in that much words or characters into the chat, it does a really good job of maintaining a working memory of the words that it is using so that it can predict the next word, right? We talked about that, how it works. So when you fill it with 128,000 tokens or characters, words, if you think of it that way, it's like you're asking it to remember all this other stuff as it tries to predict the next thing. So that's the problem with putting in too much stuff, which is also why I strongly recommended earlier that we break down any task into kind of block by block. So that's number one. Now, to specifically solve the challenge that you are facing, the modern, commonly accepted practice is to build a knowledge base that can then be pulled into a system called RAG. RAG is what it's commonly known as. It stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Long story short, you could, ask Chad to kind of give you a much more detailed view of it. But essentially what you're doing is you're putting all of those contracts into a database. Now, those contracts, imagine them in the database as spreadsheet rows. And you have row one is contract number one. Column two is the data about contract number one. It's all the words within it. Those are then going to be turned into a numerical representation of the words. Then all of the contracts in that database are going to be turned into numerical representations, vectors of like, what do these words mean in a two-dimensional word space represented by this vector. Then when you actually go query ChatGPT and you say, hey, I want you to analyze these contracts and identify the ones that have this date coming up for renewal. What it's going to do is Chad is going to come up with a query that says, what is the renewal date? That is then turned into essentially that same two-dimensional mathematical vector space. Very efficiently, we're going to go through the 500 and say, these are garbage. They're not close to the actual query that I have. These 20 are actually close to the query that I have. Then it'll bring in those 20 and just those 20 into the context window of the LLM. Then it'll get to work on your query. So think of it essentially as like a pre-processing step that whittles down your entire data set into a workable amount of knowledge that the system can then truly ingest, work with, and give you a good answer. So that's the approach. Now, I know you're going to ask me, well, how the hell do I do that? And so for that, what I recommend is check out Diffie. This is a simple, let me kind of see if I could power one up real quick. Uh, it's another kind of what you see, what you get canvas-like editor. And in here, you can add additional sections such as knowledge retrieval. And so they have an ability for you to add knowledge. You can see this plus button here, add knowledge. You would go in here, you would create your knowledge base, and this is your database. So you go create it, and in here you would import it from a file, from a website, you would sync it. You can see it accepts a bunch of different formats. You would drop in all your contracts in here. That is now your knowledge. Then you would configure that knowledge base. There's a lot of settings. I don't want to go into it right now, but read the documentation, ask Chad for more details, and this will allow you to do a retrieval, a knowledge retrieval step before, and I'm kind of mucking this up because I'm, your process essentially would look like this, something
Okay.
like this. Knowledge retrieval step, context that's passed into the LLM then works off of the context.
And so is the ChatGPT deep research function kind of like an expansion of the uh the
RAG.
context window, or is it allowing more of a multi-step?
The two things are happening with deep research. One, it is doing a multi-step process where it is maintaining a working memory of what it's doing in a specific, almost like file, like a markdown file, and going through the steps, updating that file in the process of performing the steps, so that this file keeps like a short-term memory of where it's at and what it needs to try next. And it just keeps coming back to it. It does something, comes back to it, does something, comes back to it. And then number two, all of the data that it's gathering as it does those steps, it's effectively pulling it into a self-contained RAG and knowledge base like this. And then at the end of the process, it's then creating your report or your synthesis of all the steps that it took and then extracts from it.
Okay, awesome. I was able to do a lighter weight version of some data processing with deep research that I couldn't do in the other one. So that's helpful to understand, to know the difference. Yeah, thank you. This is super,
Awesome.
super helpful.
Great. Let me go to Don.
Hi, I'm just curious about what your impression of just asking these ChatGPTs to fix their work if you don't like it. Because usually that's what I do, and unless you've overloaded it and it literally just turns off, like Claude does that sometimes, just like, you broke me. But I feel like oftentimes I'm just like, check your work, and it will get better. And so I'm just wondering how that, when do you think these like Diffie tools need to be brought in, and when do you think you just need to prompt ChatGPT to do better? Does that make sense?
Yes. I think it's best practice to have the system check its work. This is often referred to as an enforcer model, where you ask it to do something, and then the next model essentially checks that the previous model did what you asked it to do. That is a great practice to have. Now, you are referring to this process as like level one, kind of the crawl, walk, run phase. The crawl phase is you're interacting with the chat bot, and it tells you something, you read it, and you say, check your work. The sort of walk phase is you use a tool like Diffie, you have it prompt, and then you have the next model already queued up, and you say, hey, check the last work. This is what I wanted it to do. This is the output it gave me. Check it, give me an analysis of what it performed. And so why would you use one versus the other is the gist of your question. And the answer to that really depends on what are you trying to accomplish? Is this a one-off request? In which case, then use the chatbot, right? Because you're not going to set up a Diffie every time you have a one-off request. If this is a repeated workflow or task that you are constantly doing, then set up a workflow, because it's going to save you overhead each time of having to tell the system, hey, check your work.
That makes perfect sense.
Inside of here, this is now an agent in Diffie, and I'm asking it to perform a specific set of tasks. And instead of it being a one-off chat prompt, this is an agent that is then making tool calls to a custom tool that I created, where I'm passing in data to this tool call to do some addition in Python. And gosh, even as I say all this out loud, I feel like I'm going to lose some people. But long story short, I'm using a deterministic programming language to do the addition step. And then I'm having an agent do the babysitting and the checking and the enforcing against a previous LLM prompt, so that it checks the work, and not just check the work of like, here's a 9-digit number and here's a 9-digit number, tell me if it's right. most LLMs will not perform well there because there isn't training data about actual addition, the logic of performing sums. So ideally, any numerical based calculation you want any LLM to do, you are far better suited to have actual code run and perform the calculation, right? And so that is a different way to enforce and check the work of your LLM. So that's why I wanted to show that here. Well, we're deep into, I just saw the time. Holy cow. We're in our bio break. So why don't we take 5 minutes and do a quick bio break, kind of shake the cobwebs and rehydrate your brain. We have a great set of breakout rooms thanks to all the feedback and polls that you answered. Thank you for that. Alejandro, if you could start making those different breakout rooms. And at 10:10 in 5 minutes, we'll regroup right here and I will present and introduce the facilitators for each of the breakout rooms. And then we'll dive into that portion of today's session.